We have a deal, ladies and gentlemen. We have a deal. A bipartisan deal. Woo! Paul Ryan from the House, representing the Republicans, Patty Murray from the Senate, representing the Democrats, have reached a budget deal. Let's let Patty Murray take it away.
We have broken through the partisanship and the gridlock and reached a bipartisan budget compromise that will prevent a government shutdown in January. Our deal puts jobs and economic growth first by rolling back sequestration's harmful cuts to education and medical research and infrastructure investments and defense jobs for the next 2 years. Now, I know there were some people who thought these cuts should continue, but I'm glad that we increased these key domestic investments and that we averted the next round of scheduled cuts to military programs, bases, and defense jobs in our country. Because of this deal, the budget process can now stop lurching from crisis to crisis.
I love my job because I can tell you what they actually mean. Okay, so yes, it is bipartisan. Let me break it down for you and then tell you who actually pays the bill. So first of all, 2014 budget is going to be slightly over $1 trillion. $1.012 trillion. This is almost exactly the halfway point between what the Democrats and the Republicans wanted. Okay, so there's a compromise. At 2015, it's $1.014 trillion, so it doesn't rise very much at all. The Republicans have to be very happy about that. The increase in federal spending is $45 billion in 1 year and $63 billion over the course of 2 years. But what's very important is that it actually reduces the deficit. Overall, this deal reduces the deficit by $23 billion. So again, the Republicans get to brag about that, and then there are no tax increases whatsoever. Okay, now, so somebody's got to pay the bill. Wait a minute. Now, we're rolling back some of the sequester cuts, right? So that means the defense contractors are a little happy about that. Not all cuts are rolled back, but some of them are. And some of the discretionary spending cuts are also rolled back. So who's going to pay the bill? Well, that's the interesting part. We have a hike in airline travel fees. If you travel, not a lot of people are happy about that, but you got to pay the bills in some ways. And then it requires both federal workers and military personnel to contribute to a greater portion of funds to their pensions. And then it also, 2 more years of sequestration cuts to Medicare. Okay. So now, these are all cuts and additional charges to consumers, et cetera, everything that the Democrats disagreed with. So the Republicans in return gave, nothing. Doesn't mean they're not going to complain about it. They're about to do that in a second, okay? But the big concession the Republicans gave was, well, we want to do that even more. So now look, the one good news about the federal and the military workers is that the current workers are not affected by this. The cuts start in for people who get those jobs in 2014. But basically they're taking it out of the average consumer and they're taking it out on federal employees because it's easy to pick on them, military employees. What happened to support the troops? Okay, all of a sudden the Republicans not that interested in supporting the troops, nor are the Democrats, by the way. So all these people had to take cuts so that we can reinstate, yes, some discretionary spending, but also defense spending. So the military contractors get a little bit more money, and the average American loses a little bit more money. Funny how those bipartisan agreements don't usually wind up helping us. So Coalition of Federal Unions says federal workers have sacrificed over $113 billion for deficit reduction since 2011, including a 3-year pay freeze and increased pension contributions for newly hired employees. Think about that for a second, right? We're cutting the deficit, and are the rich paying a lot more? No, just a tiny bit more in one deal, okay? And then corporations, no, they're talking about corporate tax cuts. They haven't put a dime in, right? So most of the rich and the powerful come out unscathed. Who are we balancing the budget off the backs of? $113 billion before this agreement, taken away from federal workers, average workers, okay? So you begin to see that Congress's priorities. Did they take away, by the way, did they take away from their own salaries? Oh, they didn't. That's interesting. What a wonderful coincidence. Coalition of Federal Unions continues. This figure does not include the up to 8 furlough days caused by sequestration this summer and the 16-day shutdown in October. So they just keep pounding away at those workers. But Patty Murray says, hey, don't sweat it. Okay, quote, many of these same people would be facing furloughs, layoffs, and uncertainty. We've brought back certainty. Don't worry. Now, you are certainly screwed. But you can be positive you are. Okay, I guess that's an upside. Not much of one. So in other words, yes, the Democrats gave in more than the Republicans, as usual, almost as always. Does that satisfy the Republicans? Of course not! Of course not! So here come the Republicans. First of all, Senator Rand Paul. There's a recurring theme in Washington budget negotiations. It's, I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. I think it's a huge mistake to trade sequester cuts now for the promise of cuts later. So yes, I did get some of the cuts I wanted, but not enough. He continues, the small sequester spending cuts were not nearly enough to address our deficit problem. Undoing tens of billions of this modest spending restraint is shameful and must be opposed. The fact that the Republicans didn't get 100% of what they wanted is shameful, shameful. I'll tell you why he's saying this in a second. He says, I cannot support a budget that raises taxes and never balances, nor can I support a deal that does nothing to reduce our nation's $17.3 trillion debt. Okay, so in other words, one, gimme, gimme, gimme. And number two, the guy who orchestrated this for the Republicans was, oh right, Paul Ryan, who is very likely to run for president in the Republican primaries in 2016. Anybody want to take a guess as to who else is likely to run for president in the Republican primaries? Oh right, Rand Paul. Funny how that works. Now, we go back to the Democrats, Representative Chris Van Hollen. He's going to be just as outraged, right? I mean, the Republicans, for their part, say, I can't believe this is happening, and we'll have balance here. Well, oh, wait a minute. Listen to what he says instead. This agreement isn't perfect, but it is certainly better than no agreement at all. In other words, yay, we got the Republicans to agree to 80% of what they wanted. Democrats, man. So, by the way, Chris Van Hollen represents a district in Maryland that has a lot of federal workers and also some military workers as well. They should be livid with him. He screws over his own constituents to say, yes, Republicans, absolutely, sir. Look, it's not a horrible deal overall. There's been much worse deals over the last 12 years. So, you know, and by the way, unemployment benefits will not be increased. And I don't even necessarily disagree with that. I think there are got to be bounds of reason to how long we can extend unemployment benefits. So it's not remotely the worst deal I've seen in Washington. But on the other hand, it's also nothing to be celebrated. And so don't believe the hype when you see Republicans screaming on TV about how this is unacceptable.